In July 2025, the White House announced what it called perhaps the greatest deal ever made. It was a perfect promise. A $550 billion investment from Japan, America's closest ally in Asia. This wasn't just any money. According to the announcement, this capital would be deployed at the president's direction. The mission, to rebuild and expand core American industries. The fact sheet was specific. It listed energy infrastructure, semiconductor manufacturing, critical minerals, pharmaceuticals, iron, and shipbuilding. For millions of Americans, especially those in rural and small towns, this was the validation they had been waiting for. It was a sign that the America First industrial revival was not just real, but that our allies would be paying for it. Japan would fund the new factories. Japan would pay for the new jobs. It was the perfect promise. 1.2. The collapse. But the promise was hollow. It was a fantasy. Wall Street analysts, the ones paid to read the fine print, sensed it immediately. Piper Sandler characterized the $550 billion commitment as vaporware. That's a technical term for promises that appear significant but lack any concrete implementation details. Nomura Research Institute, whose economist is a former Bank of Japan policymaker, described it as just a target, not a binding commitment. Then, on October 1st, 2025, the fantasy collapsed. Japan's chief negotiator, Ryos Akazawa, delivered the final, quiet blow. He stated that Tokyo's contribution would have no foreign exchange impact and that Japan would retain control over the investment vehicle. The translation was simple. The money wasn't coming. Not in the way Washington had promised. Japan would not be handing over $550 billion for an American president to control. The greatest deal ever made was dead. 1.3. The central question, the thesis. The $550 billion deal, the vaporware money, has evaporated. But the promise to rebuild American industry is still there. The promise of new energy jobs in Alaska is still there. The promise of reviving American shipbuilding is still there. The promise of new semiconductor plants is still there. So, this leads us to the most important question of all. A question the mainstream media is not asking. What happens when $550 billion of vaporware money never arrives? Who is left to pay the bill for this American industrial revival? Today, we are not going to talk about geopolitics. We are going to follow the money. We are going to investigate the real domestic cost of this broken promise. And the answer, the brutal truth, is that you are. The American worker, the American farmer, and the American taxpayer are now paying the price for this failed deal. And you are not just paying once. You are paying twice. The domestic cost. 2.1. Case study. Hollow industries. To understand the real cost, we have to look at the very industries this vaporware money was supposed to save. Let's start with case number 1, the Alaska LNG project. This $44 billion liquefied natural gas export terminal was supposed to be the flagship venture. This was the concrete proof that Japan was funding American infrastructure at Trump's direction. The original script for this deal was simple. Japanese utilities would provide the capital, and American workers in Alaska would get the jobs. But as we reported in our last video, even before the deal collapsed, Japanese utilities were privately telling Reuters they doubted the project's profitability. They cited spiraling construction costs and weak long-term demand. They wanted to stall and get out. Now, as of November 2025, with the $550 billion framework officially dead, the project's financing is gone. According to recent reports from E&E News, the entire $44 billion project is now indefinitely stalled. The vaporware money has vanished, and so have the thousands of high-paying energy jobs promised to Alaskans. That is the first part of the bill. Now, let's look at case number 2, American shipbuilding. The White House fact sheet explicitly listed shipbuilding as a core industry to be rebuilt by Japanese funds. This was a critical promise. The U.S. shipbuilding industry, once the envy of the world, is now struggling. But struggling doesn't capture the reality. We did the research. A detailed industry report from Deloitte, published in October 2025, reveals the shocking truth. The U.S. market share of the global commercial shipbuilding industry is just 0.1%. 0.1. By comparison, China controls 53% of the market and South Korea controls 29%. The American commercial shipbuilding industry barely exists. It survives almost entirely on protected government contracts, like the Jones Act, and building for the U.S. Navy. The promise was to use Japanese money from a competing shipbuilding nation to revive an American industry that has a 0.1% market share. It was an illusion from the start, and now, with the vaporware money gone, that illusion is shattered. The promised revival for shipyards in states like Maine and Mississippi is not coming. The Alaska LNG project is stalled. The shipbuilding revival is dead on arrival. This is the cost of broken promises, but it gets worse, because the bill for these failures is now being sent directly to you. 2.2, the double cost. This is the heart of the economic bait and switch. The money to rebuild America isn't coming from Tokyo, it's coming from your pocket. You are paying for this failure twice. First, let's talk about the first cost, the tariffs. The entire $550 billion framework was born from a threat, the threat of 25% reciprocal tariffs on all Japanese goods. After the deal was signed, that was lowered to 15%. The deal is now dead. It's vaporware. But the 15% tariff on Japanese goods is still in effect. This is the question that impacts every single one of us. Who really pays for tariffs? For years, we were told that foreign countries pay the tariffs, but the data proves that is false. An economic analysis from the Budget Lab at Yale University, updated in September 2025, confirms the reality. Their research estimates that 61 to 80% of the cost of tariffs is passed directly to U.S. consumers and businesses. The foreign company doesn't pay. You do. This isn't an abstract economic theory. This is a direct, measurable cost on the core 55-plus audience of this channel. If you are a farmer in the Midwest, this hits you especially hard. You rely on specialized, high-performance machinery. Many of those tractors, combines, and balers, even from American brands like John Deere, use critical components and electronics imported from Japan. When those components face a 15% tariff at the border, the price of your new machinery goes up. The price of your replacement parts goes up. According to a sobering report from Investigate Midwest, published in October 2025, American farmers are projected to lose $44 billion in net income this year alone due to a combination of rising costs and the lingering impacts of the trade wars. Let's connect the dots. The 15% tariff that was supposed to force Japan to pay for our industrial revival has failed. But the tariff itself remains, and you, the American farmer, are paying for it in the form of higher machinery costs, contributing to that $44 billion loss. You are paying the price for a deal that collapsed. That is cost number one. Now, let's talk about the second cost, the subsidies. This is the other side of the bait and switch. The $550 billion in vaporware money from Japan has disappeared. But the political promise to build new semiconductor plants in states like Arizona and Ohio is still there. Politicians still need a ribbon-cutting ceremony. So, if the foreign money is gone, where does the new money come from? It comes from you, the taxpayer. Look no further than the CHIPS and Science Act. This is a $52.7 billion program funded entirely by U.S. taxpayers to do exactly what the vaporware money was supposed to do: subsidize the construction of semiconductor plants. This is the cruel irony of the entire situation. The original script said Japan would pay. Now, your tax dollars are being used to fill the $52.7 billion funding gap that the vaporware deal left behind. And who is receiving these taxpayer-funded subsidies? Companies like TSMC, from Taiwan, Samsung, from South Korea. And yes, even companies like Toyota, which our original video noted, had already planned to expand in the US years ago, long before the tariffs. Your tax dollars are now subsidizing the very same foreign companies that this coercive trade deal was supposed to force to invest. This is the double cost. You are paying higher prices for goods because of the tariffs. That's cost one. And you are paying higher taxes to fund the subsidies that are replacing the vaporware money. That's cost two. You are paying twice for a broken promise. 2.3. The Canadian contrast. As a Canadian analyst, watching this chaos is baffling. Our two economies, the U.S. and Canada, are the most deeply integrated in the world. Our relationship is built on stability. We rely on the USMCA, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. That agreement is not based on vaporware promises or last-minute tariff threats. It's built on predictable rules. A Ford assembly plant in Ontario knows, years in advance, what the cost of a component from a supplier in Ohio will be. A Canadian farmer knows what the rules are for exporting grain to the U.S. An American farmer knows the same. That is how you build a healthy, integrated supply chain. That is how you create long-term, sustainable jobs. You cannot run a farm, or a factory, or a small business based on chaos. You cannot plan for the future when your government is lurching from one greatest deal ever to the next. You cannot base your business plan on a $550 billion vaporware check that was never real. This chaos is killing the ability of businesses in both our countries to plan for the long term. And the cost of that chaos is not being paid by politicians in Washington. It's being paid by you. The verdict, resolution, and CTA. 3.1. The thesis proven. So let's review the facts. The $550 billion trade deal with Japan was not just a foreign policy failure. It was a domestic economic betrayal. It was a bait and switch sold to the American people. The promise was that Japan would pay to rebuild American industry. The reality is that Americans are paying, and the industry is not being rebuilt. What did Americans get from this greatest deal? You got stalled projects, like the $44 billion Alaska LNG terminal, and thousands of lost jobs. You got hollowed out industries, like shipbuilding, where the US has a 0.1% global market share, while being promised a fantasy revival. You got higher prices on everything from machinery to auto parts, thanks to a 15% tariff that failed to produce any results. And you got higher taxes to fund $52.7 billion in subsidies to pay for the exact things the vaporware money was supposed to cover. The America First policy promised that others would pay the price. The vaporware deal proves that, in the end, you are the one paying the price. 3.2. Resonance point. Engagement. There is no accountability for this. The deal is dead, but the costs remain. So, I leave you with this question. When you look at the price of your machinery, when you look at the cost of your replacement parts, when you look at your tax bill, do you feel like you are being put first? Or do you feel like you are the one left paying for these broken vaporware promises? Let me know what you are seeing in your community in the comments below. 3.3. The Flywheel CTA. This vaporware model, the promise to revive industry by coercing allies, didn't just fail with Japan, it's failing across the board. The clearest example is the U.S. shipbuilding industry. The promise was a revival. The reality, as Deloitte confirms, is a 0.1% market share. In our next video, we will investigate the real state of American shipbuilding. We'll ask why even billions of dollars in taxpayer subsidies can't seem to compete with Asia. If you believe, as I do, that economic reality always beats political promises, make sure you subscribe for that analysis. Join a community that values hard data over empty slogans. Thank you for watching.